Appreciate your update.
Yes.
Very much, and we'll certainly have you back, I'm sure. The next item on the agenda, Mr. Illuminati, is the proposed animal regulations. I know that the council initially thought that we were going to, some of the issues that had come before us with Ms. Snock, we were going to have a committee re-review it. Legal felt that in what had been requested from the Humane Society and other parties involved was that they could address that very easily through the legal process. And so I know you've been spending some time on that. We appreciate it.
So-
And I will let you go first, and then I think we do have to have a brief discussion. I know you haven't had a chance to review Mr. Brenner's letter, but I think it's very significant. I think of some of the points that he's made here tonight.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes, sir.
No one's here from the health, the animal control or Humane Society?
She was notified that we were having the work session today.
Jeez,
I think they should be here.
I do too.
Well,
I mean, I appreciate you being here, don't get me wrong, but I mean, they should be here.
I agree, and they will be at our next work session. I want Mr. Illuminati to share what work they've done now. And of course, I think there's going to be more work that'll need to be implemented. And so there will be another work session. We'll share that information with Ms. Knock and see if she can have some representation here at the next meeting. Mr. Illuminati, thank you.
So when we were last here, there was a draft bill that was discussed, and there were questions about definitions and how definitions would be imposed. So what I've done since then is I've looked at other counties' definitions. I've looked at definitions that our county currently uses. And then what I did was I broke the draft bill into essentially 9 amendments. That way, rather than looking at everything as one large, might be discussion that we're not going to go in that direction, so that the final bill that council has to vote on is a little bit cleaner at the end of the day rather than being amended up and down. The 2 documents I sent were, one revisited a number of the definitions that council had concerns about, and then the other document broke the bill into 9 potential amendments. My suggestion was to, like with the police accountability legislation, sort of look at each section by itself. However, starting with the definitions does not make the most sense, which is Amendment 1. And the amendments are not in any order of importance, but rather as they appear in the code. So if we began with Amendment 2, that would give legal an idea of what the concerns are, whether council's there's a consensus to move forward and include that in the final bill, or not. And so my proposal is that start with Amendment 2 in the document, which is to strike the penalty that's enumerated in 133-7. So the reason for this deletion is this is the only penalty not enumerated in the table provisions in 133-37. And Amendment 9 provides for a penalty for this section. This is sort of, as was mentioned in the public comment, was mentioned last time at the work session. There was an inlay back in 2018 of state code with county code, and it made it sort of difficult to figure out what the true intention was. So at the end of the day, and this is how, as the prosecutor of animal control citations, when a generic citation, when a citation comes in for a dog left outside, if it is so horrendous that it requires criminal prosecution, then that matter gets referred to the prosecutor's office. And so there have been a couple of times this year where the animal control responds, they issue citations, but then at the end of the day, the prosecutor's office ultimately takes over and the citations are not pursued. So this just Amendment 2 just sort of puts aside what the prosecution's role is from what the animal control's role is. And so the proposal is to delete that Section B in 133-7.
133-7.
Yes.
I was looking at 37.
So 37 is the broad, there's a table
Yeah.
of all of the penalties. And if you look back at 133-7, that's the only place where it provides this criminal punishment penalty, which I think was an oversight from when the state law was imposed into the county code. And so what we're doing is striking that, the criminal punishment, but adding it as a first offense, $1,000 fine.
So it's, the criminal part is being struck and it's becoming civil. Is that my
Correct.
understanding?
Because the prosecutor already has the opportunity, if the dog's outside for a period that, in their opinion, warrants criminal prosecution, that they can proceed on that.
We don't need that as a law.
That's legal's recommendation.
Okay.
And that it remains a law to have your dog outside, but it remains a civil infraction with a suggested penalty for a first offense of $1,000. It could be, council could, when we get to Amendment 9, make it $250, $500, $1,000, whatever council's pleasure is. I just took the $1,000 and put that there because I thought that was the cleanest application of what was currently in the law to what a first offense could be.
The second offense was left blank.
Correct. So there's a prohibition on any civil fine of more than $1,000. So at that point, I assume council would have made it step increases $250, $500, $1,000, but I defer to you as to what it would be. I just took the $1,000 and made it the first offense.
So the council can add something for the second offense.
I think council would then have to make the first offense less than $1,000 with the second offense. The total penalty for a civil infraction can be no more than $1,000. So the step increases as you look at 133-37, you see it sort of goes $250, $500, $1,000. If council believes that that's the appropriate for a dog outside unattended and unrestrained, then that would be the increases.
There would be no recourse for a second offense.
Another $1,000 fine. I mean, it could be reissued.
Oh, so it
But-
isn't total for that one party, it can, for each citation.
Correct. It just wouldn't be a subsequent offender enhancement. So for example, the current table reads second offense within 1 year of the first offense. So if on January 1st, someone incurs an infraction, they're subsequently, they pay the fine or are convicted in court, and then on November 1st, they incur another infraction, then they would be qualified for the subsequent offender enhancement to make the second offense a higher fine. Without the subsequent offender, it would just continue to be the first offense. So some of them have subsequent offender penalties, some of them don't. I didn't feel it was legal's position to tell council what the value of the first offense would be, but I wanted to show that it can be no more than $1,000.
First offense could be no more than 1,000, second and third.
Can't be any more than 1,000 either. So it really makes, it really becomes a policy consideration whether to make it 500, 750, 1,000. Realistically, no one reaches the subsequent offender tiers because the offenses have to occur within 1 year of the first offense. And in the 3 or 4 years I've been prosecuting the citations, I've never had a second offender.
The same, isn't it?
So it's possible it can happen, but usually at that point, somebody who's not taking care of their animals to that extent usually then fall into the criminal category, and then the prosecutor's office gets involved.
Section A, it says, subject to up to 1,000 per violation. In the chart, it says 1,000. I know you said you randomly put that in there, but should it say up to 1,000? Or are you suggesting that that would be a finite number that the council would put in there? Or should the council put in up to 1,000 for first offense, up to 1,000 for second, up to 1,000 for the third?
That can be something, I mean, ultimately, the court has the if council was to set the first offense at 1,000 and someone did not want to go to court, they would have to pay, there would be no consideration to pay a lesser fine. They would have to prepay the 1,000, so there would likely be more court appearances. Whereas if it was a prepayable of $250, somebody may be inclined to just pay the $250 through finance and not have a court hearing, then make the second offense 1,000, the third offense, or second offense $750, and the third offense 1,000. Then the court ultimately at the end of the day can impose no more than what the council sets as the maximum. But somebody can come in just like with as we see, it's currently written 133-7, imprisonment not exceeding 90 days or a fine not exceeding $1,000 or both. The court has the ultimate authority at the end of the day, but all the citations have a prepayable number. And the majority of citizens just with these prepay it because a lot of the fines are about $125 or $250. So when somebody has these, they usually prepay them. So that's just a consideration as to what the final punishment for this should be.
It states that each day the violation continues will be a separate violation. Is that amount noted anywhere?
So each day, so if animal control comes out on Monday, they observe this behavior, they rectify it, they come back out Tuesday, they see it again, it's a new offense. So it'd be $1,000 fines each.
So technically, if they could be fined, you're saying they could be fined $1,000 a day
For every day that they're found.
continuously?
Correct. I imagine there is a point where animal control seizes the dog because there's other welfare statutes that they would have concern about, or if they can't make contact with the owner.
Second day of the violation be a second offense?
Probably not under the law. Usually you have to go to court, be found guilty, know that you're now in violation, and then commit another offense. That's usually how the subsequent offender law is interpreted, to provide somebody notice that they're about to be a subsequent offender.
Go ahead.
Question.
Yes.
I don't know what all you were charged with to go over, because I have a big question about this letter we got. Is there anywhere in the, and I don't think it's in our laws, it might be, on how long they keep a dog before if they can't adopt it? I mean, we're seeing this was 20 months this dog was kept, and possibly it wasn't adopted because it was aggressive. Is there anywhere in this law that says at some point in time they don't keep animals any longer? Is that something we should address?
So the issue is the bifurcation of the Animal Control Department and the Wicomico County Humane Society. Animal Control, after, I believe the policy is like 5 or 7 days. It's not I only prosecute their citations. I don't handle any adoptions. Ms. Knock would be the better person for that. Then transfers the dog to the Humane Society. The Humane Society then has its own entire set of regulations as to what they do.
Okay.
So later, we can see, I think it's on Amendment Amendment 7, which is 133-19, it says we're striking, or legal's recommending to strike to adopt a dog or cat from the Animal Control Authority. Wicomico County does not adopt out any animals. So Animal Control does not allow anyone to adopt it. All the adoption goes through the Humane Society.
Society, okay.
So
So in other words, these laws we're dealing with now is just through animal control, not through,
correct.
okay.
So this is just, these suggestions are based on issues that animal control has received from the public or has observed in their enforcement of the statutes.
Right, understand, okay. Okay, thank you. Maybe we should be included. Something like that should be included.
And so, Mr. Lemon, I have a question. So you have them for the first 5 days, right, after a violation, the animal, correct? It's in the county's purview.
I believe so.
Okay. So at that point, whoever is representing the county, if it's you, if the state's attorney, they can make the determination if the animal needs to be euthanized because of its potential or serious danger, or whatever the two definitions are.
Well, it's sort of difficult to understand in that the only only animals coming to animal control are really dogs that an owner cannot be determined. So they're mostly animals at large, and then they're basically waiting to locate the owner. And then after those 5 days or whatever the number is, if the owner hasn't been found, then it goes over to the Humane Society for adoption. Now, if an animal has no history with animal control, there's not going to be any background on whether the animal is aggressive or not.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
It's sort of, I don't want to analogize it to criminal law, but a first-time offender is going to have no prior record with the police, so you don't know this person may be capable of murder or doing something horrendous, but there's not some sort of test that you can do to determine whether or not the dog is aggressive or not. And that's the unfortunate. It's only if that dog has a history, but I would find it hard to believe that there is a world where the dog is at large and has a history, because if the dog has a history, with, again, not being part of that process, I imagine they look at the history and go, this dog belongs to Joe Smith at 123 Main Street. Let's call Joe Smith at 123 Main Street and get the dog back to him. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
I guess I'm wondering if there is a dog attack to another dog, to a human, who intervenes at that point? Is that the sheriff's department?
So the sheriff's department can be involved, the health department can be involved, animal control can be involved. Again, this is not something I, as legal, I deal with the prosecution, but in just working through all of this and understanding all of this, I'm giving my partially educated opinion. Depending on sort of how it gets fettered out, so there could be an animal attack and the sheriff's office is called, in which case sheriff's office responds. There could be a concern about whether or not the animals have been their rabies vaccination, in which case if there's a rabid animal, a dog going through a neighborhood and it's foaming at the mouth, health department may be involved, an additional animal control. So there's a lot of different entities that can report dog bites. Those dog bites all go to the health department at the end of the day to sort of make this database. Additionally, that information is, I believe, maintained by animal control. So,
Supposed to be.
sorry,
I said or is supposed to be.
or it's supposed to be.
Little history there back in, I think it was '07, John, I think you were here, maybe '08. We had an incident in Willards where two large dogs attacked a child on a bicycle, drug him off the bicycle and mauled him very badly. And that's when council reviewed a lot of these laws. In fact, it got quite intense over all that. And Sheriff's Department, Health Department, State Police, EMTs, everybody was involved in that case. I mean, that got really So that's when we kind of buckled down, I guess is a good word to use, on the laws that, the animal control laws in Wicomico County, because that child was almost killed, And this letter that we were presented with today, that was my first thought. That could have been a child instead of another dog, It's bad enough as it was, but it could have been.
And around that time prior to, there was a lady that was viciously attacked, I believe, on West Road.
That's correct, yeah.
And it was around the same time, so we've had some history with some bad dogs.
So the only, and this is something Mr. Brenner has filed multiple MPIA requests with the county, and what my explanation is if there was something lacking, it is that only animal control, in conjunction with the Animal Appeal Board, can deem a dog potentially dangerous or dangerous. The public does not have a way of petitioning to make that finding itself. So there could be a world where down Anacostia Road, this is just a hypothetical, down Anacostia Road, there's an aggressive dog, and all the neighbors know it's an aggressive dog, and the dog's bit other dogs or it's killed other animals, but no one's ever made any complaint to animal control. So animal control would never know that this dog has a history of attacking other animals, attacking people, whether it bit them or successfully or not. And so then when there is this first bite, animal control is going to view it completely differently than this history. And so something that could be considered, though I believe is beyond the purview of what's being considered now, but maybe looking farther down the road and establishing a committee to review all these laws, is allowing the public to file complaints to make the case for a potentially dangerous deeming. But what that would unfortunately do is not encourage these neighbors really need to be notifying animal control every time one of these instances in the hypothetical happens, because otherwise, neighbors can get petty at the end of the day and say, well, these five things
Exactly.
happened, and this is I'm saying they happened, so they happened. But animal control goes, well, we never saw them. But if they called animal control every time it happened, then there would have been a recorded history of it.
Is there any way a dog could get like a chip with the information saying it's an aggressive dog, like after the first attack?
I mean, it's definitely a possibility that it can be. I believe potentially part of the amended parts of the code calls for microchipping a dangerous or potentially dangerous animal.
Because if there's a dangerous dog and the dog goes to a new owner, there's no way you would know that it's the same dog that attacked somebody previously.
Agree, because we do not have a countywide registration of animals. So that would be,
Something
that
to
then
consider.
tracks every animal's action. So that would be something that could, if the dog was microchipped, because all potentially dangerous or dangerous dogs have to be microchipped with that.
Sure.
That way.
I think that would be a good idea.
So the microchip isn't just a GPS chip, it's a
Information.
The micro,
flash drive?
essentially, yes.
Okay.
So the microchip specifically is not a GPS system. So one can personally microchip their dog with GPS so that if their dog got away, they could easily locate it.
Right.
But what's proposed, what the county would be requiring is that the microchip embeds the owner's information and potentially include this potentially dangerous information. So it would just be a flash drive in the dog, essentially.
Right, I don't want to, I really am not quite sure how the expenses of all that would come about, and
It would be paid for by-
retrieving that information and having the software to evaluate it.
The proposed amendments calls for the owner to pay for all of it.
But I'm just curious, because the Humane Society would have to have that, they would have to have software program in-house to
I believe they already do because I believe that they microchip all of their dogs, but again, that's not my,
Said,
I wasn't aware that that microchip could be that extensive. I figured it was just a GPS. Josh?
I believe Ms. Knock was talking about microchipping animals the last time she was here.
correct.
Well, maybe I wasn't paying attention. I thought she was talking about microchipping as a GPS, form of GPS and location as opposed to, but obviously there's more to it and there's data
Yeah,
as well.
it's mostly information.
I missed it. Thanks.
Do we currently have it within code to require that the Humane Society, anytime that they have an incident happen under their control, that they have it reported that this particular dog was in a particular incident? And
I believe so. I mean, there has to be, I'm going to use a criminal analogy. So robbery is the taking of property by force. An old lady, lady's walking down the street with her purse on her shoulder, and the thief pulls it off. The strap breaks. That can be a robbery because there was force to remove the property of another. But when I say robbery, is that the first thing that comes to your mind as what a robbery is? And the answer is probably not. You probably think it's more violent than that. And so how things get classified is just as important as the law. Doesn't matter if something doesn't get classified properly to start with. And so if a bite isn't deemed a bite, and I wouldn't know how to do that or not do it, I'm not making the allegation it is being done that way, but that's the best example I can use. I believe the law requires all of that to be done. That being said, there's been allegations in the past of generically police departments recategorizing numbers and calling what's a robbery, what I just described legally as a robbery, as merely a theft, because your violent crime numbers go down. So there's a world where a dog could commit a bite, but maybe for some reason it's not really deemed a bite.
I think we should specify in code that anything that happens at the Humane Society needs to be recorded. Because going on that analogy, what it seems like is that, essentially if an inmate were in jail and they, stab somebody else, that stabbing never occurred because they're in jail. It didn't happen in the public. The Humane Society, from what I'm understanding, is that they are basically saying, hey, we're trying to corral this situation. We're doing our best. We don't need to record all of these other situations. So, yes, this dog could have had a past, but we're training them to be better, and then they never record it.
So, I just want to clarify, when they're in the custody of animal control or when they're in the custody of the Humane Society?
Humane Society.
Well, I don't know what authority the council has over the Humane Society as a nonprofit. That being said, county gives money to the Humane Society, and that contract could require certain extra steps. If we're not giving money unless these things are met, that's kind of, I think, where it would have to be. But I don't believe the code can be amended to require the Humane Society to take certain actions.
Code just simply have to say an individual or any, I'm paraphrasing, public entity. Could we just add that, amend it so that it would encompass more so than just individuals and families with,
Where
living
am
in-
I?
Excuse me?
Where exactly?
I don't know. I'm just
Okay.
suggesting that wherever this kicks in,
Okay.
where it says that, we're holding these people accountable, would it be possible, or would it be necessary, would it be an overstep to say that it would also include any public agency or entity? Or would we really start getting into some?
I'll have to.
Having a dog's a dog, If you train animals for a living, you should be held accountable just as an individual homeowner might be held accountable.
Understand.
And are they already subject to these regulations since the dogs are in their possession?
If it's a law in the state or the county, anybody and everybody should be subject to obeying the law, correct? Being a member of an organization or being an organization would exempt you from a law, correct?
It should not. As I said, though, I don't know what happened. I honestly have zero interaction with the Humane Society
Shane?
whatsoever. So I don't know what their internal policies, procedures, anything like that is, how they track or don't track dog bites, dog attacks.
That's why I thought it would be a good idea for someone to be here today. I mean, we've been asking a lot of questions that
You can't answer.
council here doesn't really, it's kind of unfair to you in a way.
I appreciate that.
So I guess the question would be, and it's kind of ironic, but I guess would the Humane Society be held to the same standards as individuals under this ordinance, these ordinances?
I can try to go back through the law in total and see where there would be an interpretation that the Humane Society would have to report all bites. But at this point, I don't believe we require anyone to report any bites whatsoever. As I said in my hypothetical earlier, something down Anticoke Road, a dog may have bitten somebody, and they go, oh, don't worry about it, and no one ever reports it, that bite's never going to get so to make it potentially any public entity that's aware and define public entity as government organization, nonprofit, something of that nature, that would still not require the general public to report every bite, because I think that's what you're trying to do, is not make people report every single bite. Or do you want every bite to be reported?
Want to have an avenue so that bites could be reported and easily, that citizens felt like they could do that. But obviously what you're getting at is you don't want petty neighbors who don't like a barking dog to be able to then make a,
Allegation of a
yeah.
bite.
There's another question. Is veterinarians required to report if someone goes in, or not veterinarians, I'm sorry, doctors? Are doctors required to report animal attacks, dog bites? Is the hospital required to report that?
I do not know.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Your recommendation then might be, with the Humane Society as a whole, since the topic has come up today, you would recommend that that be something in their contract as opposed to something we establish in through ordinance?
That would be where council would have more authority, is to require those. That would be the part where it would, I think you could have a better chance of holding them accountable than through the code.
Yeah, I think so too. I think
So-
It's unfortunate, but obviously it seems like this may be an unusual circumstance, but it certainly is a significant set of circumstances that occurred here.
Understand?
With Mr. Brenner. Okay, so really, the council's responsibility right now with what you've prepared, I guess, is the only thing we would need to amend outside of your recommendations would be to maybe tighten up amendment number 9 in the penalty sequences, the first, second, third offense, right?
Correct. I
That's the
guess,
only thing that's left open-ended for the council, am I correct?
I think the only other thing is to then revisit the potential, and these amendments are what were recommended by the Animal Appeal Board, in which they have the authority as council to then adopt into the code. Last time we were here, because one of the concerns that was expressed was about vacant properties, and council asked that a follow-up. So the original proposed definition of vacant property is dwelling units, multiple family dwellings, apartment houses, boarding houses, nursing homes, and other structures, including, among others, garage sheds and similar accessory structures which are uninhabited. And there was a concern about the uninhabited. There was a concern about whether or not a hunting club could be included. And so I looked at a bunch of different places, and in the county code, they're uninhabited is any building or structure that is in a severe state of disrepair or abandonment, which is in danger of collapse or which is partially burned, or a potential danger to the health and or safety of anyone which would enter the building, as may be determined by the housing official or building official. And then a building in the above enumerated state is a nuisance in the county code, but is not a definition of uninhabited or uninhabitable. So a concern that was expressed by animal control last time was that people are not living in places where they are just keeping their animals. But the concern of council was, why are we policing that? So sort of the median, I guess, I was asked to investigate was, well, where's a structure so dilapidated that's no longer a structure? And I believe that this uninhabitable definition would compromise, if that was council's decision, so that you can't leave an animal at a place that's in severe disrepair. But if otherwise it's in good shape, then you're good to go. And if this definition of uninhabitable was incorporated, I think that then clarifies some of the concerns about outdoor club, because an outdoor club wouldn't really then be necessary, because an outdoor club's not going to be in partially burned or in disrepair or abandonment. So I think the easiest thing is if option A was looked at, that's the building in the least state of habitability. Option B, a building or structure not occupied or lived in by people. That would be more what animal control sees, is that just straight, no persons living there. Option C, a building or structure not occupied or lived in by people due to ongoing violation of the county code or ongoing construction requiring a permit. That's sort of a hybrid of A and B put together. So it's one where the building's not in complete disarray under option A. It's more than just people not living there under option B, but it recognizes that somebody's not living there because there's a code violation of some sort. And then option D is a building or structure whose occupant has ceased to inhabit intentionally or permanently for more than 14 days. So that sort of, the intentionally and permanently would be, if they're going back every day to feed the dog, I don't think it's intentionally and permanently uninhabited. But these are sort of the four options that I was able to put together. I think that expressed all the parties' concerns, and if I was provided direction on which definition there was a consensus on, I could add that to the proposed bill.
So if someone wants to use dogs or a dog in a warehouse for protection, so this describes this so they could do that. I don't know if anybody does that around here, but anyway, when I say protection, I'm talking about as night watchman or,
I think A, B, C, or D would satisfy that, in that the building's occupied during the day and the animals are just there at night. I don't think it's intentionally abandoned. I don't think it's not
okay.
occupied.
That's the way I read it anyway. Yeah, so.
I think if that was a concern, that would not be a violation regardless of if A, B, C, or D was adopted as the definition of uninhabitable.
I guess this was kind of initiated by somebody in my district. There was a house off of Ocean City Road where the house was pretty poor shape. Folks had moved out and the dogs were left in the house, but they did show up to feed them.
Right.
Of course, the neighbors were upset. They heard the dogs barking, and, they would go over and dogs were in the house, and I don't know how good a shape or how bad a shape the house was in inside, because that was one of the complaints, is the animal control could not enter the house to see what the living conditions were, but the dogs were in there, but they were being fed each day and watered, so obviously not a very good way to treat your animals, but So,
If this were obviously a human structure, you know, the health, there would be a health component to that. We're just specifically talking about the structure itself and the stability of the building, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, should there be a health component to this? If this were a human house couldn't be inhabitable if it was, you know, covered in, you know, pet feces or other kind of things. If there's other components there, do we need to be? Is that too? Do we not want to get into that realm? I guess of just trying to determine what is unhealthy for an animal. But certainly, if you're confined to a small space and you don't have the ability to, you know, to do natural human function or biological functions elsewhere, a space could become unhealthy very quickly. And is that, I guess, an area that we want to add into that?
I would defer to animal control on that. I wouldn't know the first thing.
More of a rhetorical question given to our folks who aren't here.
And I think a lot of what we discussed in the last work session was the fact that the definitions were many may construe them to be a little bit broad, but the idea wasn't to be characterizing hard and fast legislation. We were just giving something to allow the animal control officer as well as the judiciary a little flexibility on how they may, because the judiciary still has to get involved in this as far as to what degree they might, how egregious the fine they might want to implement or any other procedures. Am I correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So I think that's something we don't lose sight of. It's not like a hard and fast that says this is going to put you in jail. It just gives us an opportunity to act if necessary.
Correct.
Now, the other item outside of the amendment number 9, which is the $1,000, which council will have to review, the options. I found those kind of difficult to, like even personally, to make a decision on vertebrae or however you listed those. Any thoughts from members of the council in reviewing what was listed in the brief book as council only under options? Starting with the first one, I can't give it to you because my laptop crashed. I'm waiting for it to come back up. But
Page 163 for folks who don't have it.
what's the first set of options?
Options to redefine animal. Animal is currently defined as an animate being other than a human being capable of voluntary movement. And the proposed definitions there, we have option 1, a living creature except a human being. And you can see the Maryland Criminal Code. Option 2, any live vertebrate creature, domestic or wild. Option 3, a vertebrate species of animal other than human. Or 4, any vertebrate animal, domestic or wild, which includes non-human mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, or fish.
So was there any opinion from council members in reviewing those options as to which of those you felt was most suitable?
From a purely legal standpoint, we haven't had any issues with the definition of animal in court. So I just, there were a lot of, from a legal standpoint, from a prosecution standpoint, I'm satisfied with what is currently in the code.
Page.
Okay.
So
All right. It appears to me we're going to take your advice on that one. What's the next one, Josh?
Options 2, to redefine domestic animal. Current code definition is basically saying domestic animal, an animal or of a tame species commonly kept as a pet or livestock, including cats, dogs, cows, fowls, ferrets, horse, or swine, except an animal being maintained for the production of food products, fiber, or breeding. That's the current code. And then,
So that's the animal control section. Then there's another definition, 225, for planning and zoning with a different definition of domestic animal. It's similar, but it is a little different. Again, I'm satisfied with, from a prosecution standpoint, of the current definition in 133-2. There hasn't been any issues, but I did provide a few options based on what others had used.
it would be nice to have consistent code regardless of planning. The other options that they had domestic included any animal that has long continued association with humans has become thoroughly tamed or domesticated. Option 2, an animal that by habitat or training lives within an association with humans. Or 3, any animal socially recognized and maintained for companionship as a hobby by humans. Obviously, we want to be careful there, but difference between agriculture and domestic.
If there was an intent to unify between 133-2 and 225-25, I would want planning and zoning to comment, because that would be their area on how that would impact their department.
I personally don't have any strong feelings on those. If you all feel good on the legal side, and then
I'm satisfied with the current definition.
It says hybrids of animals normally found in the wild state are not included within the meaning of domestic animals as well.
I think from a planning standpoint, they were trying to use that to try to differentiate between agriculture, I'm assuming, is what they were trying to do.
I believe so.
Hybrids of animals. So no cloned animals in here.
We'll be leaving that as is as well.
So then the real question is there going to be a definition of uninhabited?
Sure. And any input from council on this? I know I made my comments about the fact that it's not a hard and fast law.
I liked option A, I guess in general. I don't have strong feelings on it, but I think it's the most broad, even though you note a building does have a, I guess it is noted in code elsewhere. There's not a definition. So this would be any building or structure that is in a severe state of disrepair or in abandonment, in which is in danger of collapse or which is partly burned or potentially in potential danger to the health or safety of anyone that would enter the building as may be determined by the housing official.
In reading this too, I mean, my first thought was I would like to see what the Humane Society has to say about this based on their experience in the field, right? Because we're trying to address what their concerns are. Because, the option D, which talked about the 14 days, I thought, well, that is a real definable element there that we can say that's something that they could say is an issue, which could, I guess, strengthen their case. But I honestly, in defining I would like to have them, because it could be a hybrid of all 4 options, right? I mean, you could implement the 14 days into the option A.
Try to figure something like that. Yes.
So I guess, Mrs. Hurley, part of what a question we would, I think, most specifically here, this section here, as we're reviewing, we definitely would need input from the Humane Society based on their field experiences.
Growing up, I did have a neighbor, a neighboring farm that the family, they would, there was always deer or other animals being hit by cars. And so we knew that they would have an enclosed area and then would get them back, get those animals back to life, or, back to, break, if they would fix the legs, they would go and take care of the animal on their own dime as their own welfare, and then rehab them essentially out of their own public good. You wouldn't want a situation in the future where someone would assume that is, they were doing that to be helpful. I guess we don't want to penalize anyone who would be trying to be helpful to, to an animal. It's like a deer or somebody that doesn't need regular shelter or other kind of things.
Wouldn't that rehabbing fall under natural resources police?
They were just doing it just because it was a common, other they would get mauled or other kind of things,
And I'd want to do the same.
Yeah, I guess you wouldn't want a neighbor, somebody driving by to think that, or somebody else to come by and approach that to think that it's something different. Those were pets. They were not. They were. And they didn't want to leave that off at the cost of somebody else, or just to let them die.
I think we've addressed the first 2, number 1 and 2.
Yes.
Out of default, more or less. 3 and 4, I think we would want to revisit with the Humane Society here. And unless I'm missing something, I mean, the only other thing I believe we might have to look at is going back again to just above this on 163 as to how the council, with Mr. Illuminati's recommendations as to what he witnesses in court, what would be the best penalties for first offense, second offense, and third offense. Would that be correct?
Correct.
And as in Section A, it states up to $1,000 per violation. Would we simply reiterate that under first, second, and third offense, or what else? What might be, would that be sufficient enough, Mr. Illuminati, you think?
Yes, that would be sufficient, and then as long as the table in 37 outlined exactly what the punishments were, that would be the notice to the public.
But we wouldn't be leaving it blank, like the second and third offense.
Correct. It would just be, well, it would, you would not leave it blank if $1,000 fine was not your first offense maximum. If-
So I think $1,000 for a first offense would be very strict. When we say like first offense 1,000, the judge has the option to reduce it themselves, right?
Correct. And as I said, a lot of individuals just prepay their citations, and there's,
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, you said it before. So to put a specific number in here might avoid the whole process of adjudication. In other words, someone would be able to pay a $250, but they're not going to write a $1,000 check.
my God,
Okay.
I wouldn't.
So we should maybe do $250, $500, and $1,000.
Something like that would,
Up to $250, $500, and $1,000.
correct.
All right, so we need numbers.
Somebody might think 250 is not enough. But there's a lot of people in the public that would feel that way.
Anybody else?
I'm okay with 250, 500,000. I've gone back and forth on this. And by the way, the $1,000 limit, is that you said defined by state code? We only have
Yes.
we only have up the limit to be able to do that? Okay. There's a lot of folks obviously who may have, we don't want to get anyone caught in a situation where they happen to have, there was a extenuating circumstance, somebody saw it and they got $1,000 fine, I guess, even though they wouldn't actually pay. We don't want to upset people, so you would rather get a lower amount and just get it taken care of quickly and addressed without having to go through a further process, right? Yeah.
Correct. And to the extent that a lot of these at-large cases are I try to make my own decision because I have to prosecute at the end of the day. As an attorney, I have to go in court and stand before a judge and say, this is what's on. And if it's something that's really, I can't, in good conscience, go up there and do it, I tell animal control, we're not prosecuting this one. It's not happening today. I'm going to dismiss it. The person has no history. They got there within 2 minutes. They had a good story for why they did what they did. We're not going forward. I really try to give the benefit of the doubt at the end of the day to the owner. And in the instances when animal control says this person is somebody we have consistently had problems with, it's always something. Every other month we're out there, that person I hold to a higher standard and make sure there's not going to be a deal cut at the end of the day. So I do take the responsibility the council gives us to go prosecute very seriously.
Well, then if we settle on 500 and 1,000 for the second and third offense, because you're getting into people who aren't trying to do right.
Exactly.
Now, the first offense, I think, is the most important one, and that's based on your history. We could say the first offense would be 250. Are you going to see someone that's going to pay that? It's going to start to build up into the court system, and you may find yourself that you have to dismiss it. Would it be better if it were $100 for a first offense, and it would be more efficient for everyone and still serve the purpose of some type of punitive measure?
I think that's the ultimate goal at the end of the day, is to have to be a deterrent, and enough of a deterrent, just like with the red light cameras.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
don't run the red light. It's not worth the $35 or whatever it is. And if that's an extra deterrent, rather than you shouldn't be running a red light to begin with, you shouldn't be leaving your dogs outside unattended and restrained to begin with.
Well, I would suggest, and we're not in a formal resolution yet, but I would suggest that we look at first offense being $100 to allow for any set of particular circumstances that might develop. The second offense, 500, whereas the judge could certainly make it 2 or make it 100 if they wanted, but at least it allows it to go to that level. And then the third one would be 1,000, so that I think it's important that the degree increases with the offenses, so they don't just think, it's another $100. So that's what I would suggest, 1, 5, and 1,000. 100, 500, 1,000.
I'm okay with that.
Anybody? Everybody? Okay. Think you'll be okay with that? And outside of that, 3 and 4, I guess, is something that we need to have. Hopefully, we'll have one more work session. And Mr. Illuminati, how do you see us best trying to address what Mr. Brenner has brought before us? Well, if you can think about that, and then when we have our next work session, try to see maybe any suggestions on how it could be addressed. Or if you feel that it's an in-house situation, circumstances between the county itself and the Humane Society.
If Ms. Hurley could provide me a copy of the letter, I'll then be able to look at it
Okay.
and
All right.
See
I can give you a
exactly.
paper, you want a PDF, I'm assuming, from Ms. Hurley.
I just need something I can,
That one here. Good catch.
All right.
so, all right. I will work on that between now and the next session, and if Animal Control / Humane Society can be here next time, I think they can answer your substantive questions on the process and concerns about habitability and things of that nature.
Wonderful.
All right?
Thank you very much.
Thank
Lot
you
of
very
good
much.
work.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
I appreciate that.
So at this time, it's 12:10. I would entertain that we would take a half-hour recess for lunch.
So moved.
And
Second.
anyone in the audience can join us. I say that because I see Carl Anderson out there, and I know he's always hungry. How do Ravens do? We'll take a half-hour recess.
Pretty freaky.
20s and 22s in that. Well, the next item on the agenda in our open work session is a discussion on the sale of county-owned property to expand the Delmarva Power Substation located on West Church Street in Hebron, Maryland. Mr. Mark Whitelock, who has been here all morning. How are you, sir?
Good, how are you?
Doing good, doing well, thanks.
All right, so what we have here is, it's actually a company called Urban Solar who contacted us about, now not to be confused with the Hebron water tower site that we had last week. This is actually right on the other side of it. So one's to the right, one's to the left. And we had them do an appraisal, which we got back for $20,000 an acre. This is all involved in expanding the substation that DP&L has there in order to allow for a big solar project that's out on 50. That would be right across from the old, what was it, the farmer's wife. I believe it's a sod farm there now.
Whole side farm, where Matt,
Yeah, yeah.
that's gonna be a whole solar field? Jeez.
So they have to expand the substation in order to be able to accept the
Power.
volume.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what they're doing there. Now, as we've read over some documents, especially this morning, I was talking to Mr. Wilbur, the county attorney, and we need a little bit of more of a clarification. It says approximately 1 acre, or if you read into a lot of the documents, it says 1 acre plus or minus. We don't really like plus or minus, it's too much. So we're gonna get some clarification on that, because we don't want them, you know, we think we're selling them an acre of land for $20,000 and they end up with 1.5 acres, plus or minus.
They should give you the meets and bounds.
Right. So, I mean, you know, it's a little subjective. It's not very clear. We don't like clarity, and we like clarity in our life. We don't like
Have it
unclear.
surveyed?
No, they haven't had it surveyed.
Well, then you would know.
Well, we're gonna have it. Somebody's gonna have it surveyed. I'm not gonna have it surveyed. So, and this is basically what it's for. It's just for upgrading that DP&L substation on, I believe it's Church Street in Hebron.
Right on that curve.
Yeah. I think railroad goes right straight off.
What's your recommendation?
Yeah, it really has no value to us. It's just derelict property that's behind our transfer station. Same way we said about the water tower site. It's not something that we see ourselves expanding to in the future.
Questions?
I was going to say, so it said obviously we do need to prepare for a electric grid that is able to handle, I think going forward in the future. Obviously, you saw 2 weeks ago, California moved forward with basically ending, having basically only electric vehicles. That of course then affects a quarter of the states in the United States, and many of the top manufacturers or vehicle manufacturers in the country, of course, have all said that they're stopping within the next couple of years any gas vehicles. So all that bringing back to
Wait a minute, Josh. You're saying that vehicle manufacturers in the next couple years are quitting making gas-powered vehicles?
by 2030, Chevrolet will no longer be making as
That's
well
not the
as
next couple years.
Volvo. Yeah, well, I mean, it's 7 years.
It's not
Okay,
far. That's
whatever.
Pardon me, they're starting the process
I understand.
already
In our
now.
lifetime, Joe, in our lifetime.
Within,
Give me a hard
to be
time.
completed within the next 7 years, of which, then, so, long story made short, we have to dramatically upgrade our infrastructure when it comes to this. So I don't know if there's other kind of things, if this is a bigger issue or a bigger topic, but certainly we need to have the ability to capacity to move electric around. I think what we did here, and just so it said, what we did here a couple of years ago was we were talking about solar siting with MACO, interstate counties, and they were basically saying the Eastern Shore, especially the lower shore, is one of those areas where we don't currently have capacity to move enough energy through the grid.
Right.
So, putting that in context of what we do here.
No foreseeable use of that property in the future, correct?
No.
Okay.
We'd actually have to expand out, or we have a fence line in there. This is outside of our fence line, same way with the water tower site. It's just there.
Is it in the town, is it in the town limits?
Yes, I believe it is.
I mean, are they,
Church Street and Railroad, I believe, are
are
in.
they okay with it? I mean, are they gonna have to have any approve of this?
Annexed.
This street?
No,
Well,
no.
the only, no, I don't think it'll have to be annexed. The only discussion, we were here last week for the water tower. I don't think necessarily that the solar field was something that the town of Hebron wanted out there. Because, some years ago, we'd saw plans where there was a mixed residential, commercial use out there in that field. So I think they were kind of hoping that something like that would come back, but I don't think it would.
Well, I mean, had they expressed support or for this? Is it gonna go to their zoning department for it to be approved? Like, I mean, do they know about it, I guess, even?
They do now, because I told them about it last week.
Okay, they were okay with it?
And I think they were more or less indifferent to it.
Okay, all right, okay.
Really, for my purposes coming up here, Hebron zoning issues and all those types of things is for Hebron to worry about, not for me.
Well, I mean, we should have respect for the
Well,
town. I
yeah,
mean,
and that's why I went
Hebron,
ahead.
it's
I told
whether
them
they
when I
want
was
this
up
or
here,
not,
yeah. So my only problem right now is plus or minus or approximately.
Questions? Yes.
Are we selling this property to them, or are we donating it?
Now, this would be a sale.
A sale, okay.
So basically, I believe that appraised at $20,000 an acre.
Is that what we're selling it for?
Yes,
You don't know if you got an acre and a half, you said.
approximately, yeah, it's approximately. We have about an acre approximately, plus or minus. So, but we're gonna get clarification on the acre, before we come back to council.
Right. When it comes back as a resolution, it'll be exact.
You wanna know exactly what it is.
Okay.
It does look like it's in the town, in the TT zone, the town transition, so it makes sense. So, okay.
Everybody good? Mark, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Just so everyone knows, it has to come back for a public hearing to surplus the property first, and we can do that on October the 18th because it has to be advertised for 2 weeks. Council has to, you can't vote at that meeting, so you would be able to vote at the following meeting, which would be the first meeting in November. But the public hearing would be on the 18th of October.
Good one. Now, we have you again on the 908 Lock Raven.
I'm the only guy left.
Can you just give us the
Last
overview
man
for the
standing.
public?
Huh?
Could you just give an overview for the public?
Sure. So this is the Adler residence at, I believe it's 908 Lock Raven Road, which is over by Shoemaker Pond. It is not currently serviced by the city of Salisbury as far as sewer and water goes, and they have a failing septic system. And they're pretty much on I don't want to call it a holding tank because it's still their septic system that they've been using, but the pumping is frequent, more or less like a holding tank is. There is, at this point, this was already an upgraded system that has failed. And so basically what they need is hook up into the city of Salisbury's sewer line, which is right behind their house. And that's so the ask is what we're here for is to amend the sewer water plan to accept this residence into the the water sewer plan so that they can be added into a priority funding area.
The reality of it is, it's just a housekeeping measure that we have to follow with our water and sewer plan.
Correct.
So that it's consistent.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Well, I guess my question is, I understand the city doesn't allow any more water and sewer hooked up to anybody that they don't annex? Are they going to annex these folks, or are they going to let this go? This one go?
I think that's still to be determined. I know they have agreed to allow the hookup.
So they're with or without annexation, so you don't know?
Yeah.
Oh, it'll be an annexation. They're not going to hook it up without an.
Is that right? Okay. That was my question.
Yeah, they're not going to, they don't do urban services anymore.
Okay.
That's correct. They don't.
Yeah. So, I was in Willards the other night, and they have a property, one that's being annexed into the Willards, and another property that's being de-annexed back into the county. And
That's technically called detachment.
okay, I'm not sure, but I was wondering whether or not that would come into play with the water and sewer, our master plan as well, whether we had to.
Gosh, I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, in other words, well, what plan's it in now?
Excuse me?
What town did you say this was?
Willards.
See us all.
This is city of Salisbury.
No, I get it. I know. I just,
No, the one
I was
he's
just saying
talking about is.
whether or not there would have to be an amendment to the water and sewer master plan, the counties, if they have one that's being annexed in and one that's being annexed out.
I see your point.
I guess it depends on if it's already within the area.
Probably something for the administration to worry about. I just thought I'd throw it out
Yep.
there. But anyway, so we'll be moving forward. That's okay with council, right? Everybody's good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Ms. Hurley,
It also requires a public hearing, and we can have that on October the 18th at 10 a.m.
wonderful. All right.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nope, that's
Entertain a
it.
motion to adjourn. Second.
Sorry.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.
Last question, John.